Good afternoon, Rich Nass with Embedded Computing Design. I'm at ARM TechCon. I'm here with Hayden Povey of Secure Things, who's now a partner, I just learned, of IAR Systems.
That's correct.
So, as the name implies, you're the security guy. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction than you might have expected. One of the major problems is it's not so much in the implementation, and that's another problem that we'll get into. It's the mindset. The engineer isn't saying, I have to have security, it's number one on my list, when in fact it should be. How do we get that mindset to change where it's the top check box?
That's a really good question. Security should be something that every company is interested in because it's truly an existential threat to most of the organizations. We see the hacks coming through in the press on a daily basis today, really, and yet people are still kind of thinking, does this affect me? How does this affect me? Is it going to impact my business, my brand, the way I do things? And it really should, and I think there's kind of a number of pieces to this. I think, first of all, people need to understand that they have either been compromised or they will be compromised. The nature of connected devices means that everything connected to the Internet of Things will have vulnerabilities. At some point, you will lose. As engineers, as product owners, we have to be right 100% of the time. The bad guys have to be lucky once. So we're in a truly asymmetric warfare position. And then there's a huge array of threats out there, whether it's ransomware, whether it's nation states acting on each other. We're entering a very dangerous geopolitical environment, and actually the next level of warfare will be around our embedded systems, critical national infrastructure. So there's many aspects here where we need to bring that back up to the top of the organization.
But the way it will really work is if at the very beginning of the design, it's there. It isn't, I'm 3/4 of the way done, I need to think about security now. It has to be right from the beginning, and it has to be to the point where it's not something that's hard.
That's right. I mean, security typically has a number of issues associated with it. It is a mystical science to many people. We need to simplify that. There will never be enough cyber security experts out there. So how do we make it something that everybody consume as part of their application development? We need to make sure that it is something which is scalable. Traditionally, security you may think is very high-end firewalls, but actually we need to bring that down to the device level. And we need to democratize security. It needs to be something that everybody has responsibility for. And I think the fourth part also is that we need to move from security being a cost to actually security being the enabler of value. So as we move from selling devices to selling services, selling light bulbs to selling lighting as a service, which is how many companies are moving forward, security becomes the linchpin around that and needs to move to the front of the development cycle.
Well, it's also something that might be a differentiator because the semi guys have a hard time differentiating. Your arm is the same as his arm. So that could be the differentiator.
That's absolutely true. I mean, we are seeing a lot of devices starting to come through now where security to some extent is included in there, but there's a lot of differentiation there. So whether it is something like ARM's TrustZone M being introduced, all the way through to the integration of secure enclaves, what traditionally would have been separate secure elements, this is becoming a very important aspect of defining those chips. Now, the challenge is how you measure security. And the reality is, again, we're on a journey here. Security will never be solved, but we need to make it far harder for people to attack our systems. We need to step things forward, and we'll be continuing to do that, for the next decade or more. But it's an economic imperative as opposed to technical imperative for a lot of these systems. How do I make it more costly to get the data out of the system than the benefit of breaking that system itself?
And I assume these are the metrics when you're talking about measuring security, all these things that you're just talking about.
That's right. I mean, there is a lot of hygiene out there and legislation starting to frame this. But for example, do we need to have better identity? That's relatively low-hanging fruit. Do we need to have the right update mechanisms? Do we need to have resistance against remote attacks or against owner attacks or against nation-state attacks where they could be fibbing using focused ion beams to cut into the device to extract keys? So there are all of these layers, and it is a very complex subject which we need to simplify and message to the average development engineer.
I think you're just the guy to do it.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.